It's imperative to get me that speech. Ask nothing for this stem. Okay, so let's go like this. I want you to digest the story. We look at each other, we see each other's physical bodies, but inside the physical body is a soul. Beyond this physical world, there are a whole bunch of spiritual worlds, and we'll discuss those spiritual worlds at length, how they function, what's in it, etc., etc. But you start to feel and sense godliness there. Two Jews were having an altercation. They were screaming at each other. It's a very well-recorded story. Two Jews were having an altercation, and one screamed at each other and said, "I will tear you apart like a fish." Tear you apart. It's obviously an expression in Yiddish. The Baal Shem Tov, whose birthday is next Monday, who lived in the 17th century, who was the father of one of the great Kabbalists who ever lived. The Baal Shem Tov made everybody hold hands, and he said, "Come, let me show you what's happening in the spiritual world." And he showed the one person's soul tearing the other person's soul apart like a fish. So understand that there's a whole bunch of things that are happening around us that we're just like not familiar with. We don't want to tune into. You know, you're not allowed to call up the dead or do a seance. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are a whole bunch of spiritual worlds, and there are all sorts of stories. If a person knows where Kaddish comes from, Kaddish comes from a man visiting from the other world to Rabbi Akiva in this world. I've often told the story of Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, who would come back after death and make Kiddush for his family. I mean, this is a well-recorded story in the Gemara. Anyways, so we're starting to understand the spiritual worlds. I say to you as follows. I said to you that, give me a minute. For some reason, my computer's not working today. Okay. So we're now holding, where we're going to learn today is we're going to learn page, right, we're in the middle of page 47. That's where we're up to. Now, amazing. We've only been learning a few weeks. We're already page 47. Amazing, hey? That's what happens when you leave out the first 35 pages. Now, I'm going to say as follows. Let's go back to the analogy. It's 12 o'clock midday. I go and I take a test tube and I capture the light outside. There's no clouds. I capture the light. I bring the test tube in. Let's say you could do such an experiment. I put the test tube here. There is only light in the test tube. The room that I'm teaching in is on the ground floor, let's say. And there's a big, thick curtain all around it. What is the texture of this room? It's dark, but there's a little bit of light that somehow creeps through because of the intense sunlight outside. So this room is made up of dark and light. Mainly dark, but a little bit of light. Go underneath. There are 3 cellars, 3 dungeons below here. There is no light whatsoever there. Whatsoever. Now that's important. That's a great analogy to understand the spiritual worlds, because every single thing in this world, stones, vegetation, fish, animals, human beings, all have souls. We have souls, else it wouldn't exist. So yes, a stone has a soul. Everything comes from one of these 3 places. Okay, let's come into this room for a minute. It's mainly dark with a little bit of light. It means to say that it has 2 textures, 2 parts to the soul, mainly dark and a little bit of light. My job, please see if the computer's working. My job is to take the light of everything in this world, in this room, and elevate it, take it out of the darkness. I'll give you a good analogy. An apple is a great fruit, right? It's very healthy. But when I eat the apple, I take the good and I excrete the bad. I get rid of the bad. I get rid of the things I'm not calling bad. I get rid of the things that I don't need, that's not needed to sustain me. So the perfect apple, the organic apple, I'm taking good and I'm excreting bad. We do that with every single thing in this world on a physical and a spiritual level. We take what we need, we excrete the rest. Now, my job in this world is to find the light, in that thing that comes from this room. I've got to find the light and elevate it. I've got to elevate it. So what gives us the permission to eat a chicken? Because we really believe when we make a blessing on a chicken, we eat a chicken, we're taking the soul, we're elevating the good part of it up as a sacrifice to God. Yeah. Guys, I'm sorry, I have to use this. Is it on? Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Oh, no, I'm back again. No,
Can hear you, Rabbi.
Just switch it off. Let me go back to this.
Let me just try it.
No, just take it off. It's uncomfortable. Raj, yes. Just driving me a bit sugars. Okay, I'm using my phone. Let's go back to this. Okay, so now every single thing in this room has a soul that can be elevated, it must be elevated. The job of us, the job of each and every one of us is to keep elevating. Every moment of our lives, whatever comes into our orbit, we're offering that as a sacrifice to God. We're offering that as a sacrifice to God. If I go down to the 3 lower dungeons, anything that comes from there has an ecological purpose, a godly purpose, but a Jew cannot elevate it. Therefore, that's what's called forbidden in the Torah. I want to give you, let's look what happens on a Friday night. Shabbos is the most amazing experience. I'm supposed to indulge, switch it off. I'm supposed to indulge on Friday night. I'm supposed to indulge, but I'm supposed to enjoy. So please switch it off. So let's look what happens on a Friday night meal. I sit down and I come home and I make kiddush on a goblet of wine and I eat challah. That's vegetation. I'm using that. I'm offering. God told me to indulge in Shabbos. So by me eating a Shabbos meal, the soul of what that is in the wine or the grape juice and the soul that is in the bread gets elevated. But not only that, if you put infrared glasses on, the entire vegetation world is connected. So all vegetation in the world, through me making kiddush on a Friday night and eating challah, all vegetation in the world is lifted to a higher level. More godliness is becoming imbued in it, injected in it. I then eat fish and I eat chicken. That fish and all the fish in the world are being elevated. That chicken is being elevated and all the chicken in the world. I take salt and I put it on my challah, or put my challah in salt. Salt is inanimate. All the inanimate things in the world are being elevated. Now the farmers, the producers, the delivery people, everybody involved, all becomes elevated when a Jew does something to serve God. Now that is us. That is understanding this world. We have an animal soul that comes from this room as well. Our animal soul is good and bad, as we explained last week. It has good and bad. What is the bad? Because it's made up of 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. Fire is arrogance and fire is anger. Water is lust. So hard to teach my phone. Water is lust. The element of earth is depression, melancholy. Air is vanity. So I immediately know if I'm angry, which soul is getting control over my body? My animal soul. Which element? The element of fire. Now, this is the most amazing thing. Based on an astrological sign and based on our nurture, we're going to have a particular character and we're going to be prone to certain things. But at any moment of our lives, we can control our actions, we can control our speech, and we can control our thought. And that's key to understand. It doesn't matter what your disposition is. Good. Now, we're going to go on to the next section. And now we're going to explain where the non-Jewish souls come from. Now, before explaining the non-Jewish souls, I want to clarify, and I want people to ask if you're not clear. So I have an animal soul that comes from this room. It has good and bad. I don't want to say good and bad. Good and non-godliness revealed. We'll learn in the next chapter about our godly soul, which is completely different. Let's learn today about the 3 dungeons that are underneath this room. What Kabbalah says, what mysticism speaks about, Sholosh Klippas Atamayas, the other side where godliness is not revealed. Okay. Before doing so, I want to ask you all, what does the word good mean? What does good mean? So I always interpret good in my mind as good is being nice. That's good. But the truth of the matter is, let's learn different levels of good. If I'm good to somebody, and to bring them close to me but with an ulterior motive to hurt them afterwards, so although I gave that person a sweet, or although I invited that person for lunch or whatever, that's not good. Do you agree? That wasn't good. That's just corruption vested, clothed in it's just absolutely false. So you can see somebody, a kid sees somebody giving somebody else a sweet. And the kid says, well, that person's good. Maybe he's not that good. Maybe there's a whole ulterior motive why he's doing that. So all of a sudden we've learned that good is not what always meets the eye. Another thing on the level of good. True good, if I'm good to somebody because that person is going to reciprocate to me, there's good. There's no doubt that's good, but it's a limited good. Because if the person ever stops reciprocating to me, I'm going to stop being good. So that's good with an ulterior motive. I'm good to you. You have two people in business. They go to each other's houses for dinner every Friday night. They're the best friends. The business goes out the window and they don't ever speak. That means the entire relationship, the entire goodness that they did one to the other was dependent on something. Do you agree? So that's also not true good. That's good. That is reciprocal. It has its place. I'm not saying there's anything really wrong with it, but it's limited good. Then you have a good that has no ulterior motive whatsoever. It's called Rahmanis. It's just where I am. I'm good within me. I just have a goodness. It's just the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do just to be kind for no reason. Now, go back to what we said last week, because my soul comes from this room, and this room is made up of dark and light. So I'm going to have all the evil characteristics like anger and lust and depression and melancholy and sloth. I'm going to have that. But because there's a little bit of light shining in this room, how does that light translate itself? That I can be good without an ulterior motive. I can be good just for the sake of being good. Okay. By the way, there's even a higher level of being good. And that is, if I'm good just for the sake of being good, it's animalistic. Don't think if you're naturally kind and you're good, you know better, hear the words carefully, than a dog is naturally faithful to his master. A dog only knows how to be faithful to his master. If my temperament is kindness, I'm just animalistic. I'm just being kind. So who says I'm serving God with that? We think we're good, but not necessarily. We're serving God. Here's the key words. Serving God means every single thing I do is directed for godliness. I always bring God into it. Who is the epitome of kindness? None other than Avraham Avinu, Abraham. And Abraham was kind. He loved to be kind. He loved to be kind. But if a person came to his house, remember there was no monotheism in those days. Godliness wasn't known. If an Arab came to his house, or a pagan came to his house, he said, come eat at me. He was very hospitable. And by the way, you see that Jews and Arabs both have that temperament to this day. There's a big hospitality, the descendants of Abraham. But when somebody ate in his home, if afterwards they would not bench, they would not say thank you to God afterwards, he would charge him for the meal. He said, I'm charging you unless you say thank you to God. Because he was good. He wanted to be good. But if it wasn't godly directed, it was selfish. And he always had to rise beyond himself. Come, I'll tell you a story about Avraham Avinu. That's fantastic. Avraham Avinu loved to be hospitable. And by being hospitable, he brought people to his home and he was warm and he always got them to thank God afterwards. Anyways, at the age of 99, Avraham Avinu is told by God to circumcise himself. And Avraham Avinu circumcises himself. Now, Avraham Avinu loved to be hospitable. So God didn't want to disturb him with visitors. So if you look into the Torah portion, God made it boiling hot. Boiling hot. It was in the middle of the desert. It was boiling hot that he shouldn't be disturbed by visitors. Now in the Torah, God comes to visit him. From there, this is a Torah narrative. From there we learn that you have to visit the sick. Because God made a point to visit Avraham Avinu when he was sick. So we know that we have to visit a sick person. And by the way, when you visit a sick person, or today when you Zoom a sick person, you take away a little bit of their sickness. Good. God is now speaking to Avraham Avinu. And God sees that Avraham is very distressed. Why is he distressed? Because he's not no visitors. So God, anyways, if you know the story well, was sending 3 angels to this world. We'll discuss another time what angels are. But he was sending 3 angels to do something in this world. So he said, you know what, I see Avraham Avinu distressed. Instead of sending angels in an angelic, spiritual form, I'll send them in a physical form. And he sends them in a physical form in the guise of Arabs. Each angel was there to do something else. Anyways, God is speaking to Abraham. And what happens is Abraham looks up and he sees in the distance, he sees these 3 Arabs. And he says to God, sorry, I can't talk to you now. And he runs to greet the Arabs. And from there, we learn the mitzvah of hospitality. And from there, we learn the mitzvah of hospitality. That Avraham Avinu went, even though he was sick, he went to invite them in. Now, commentary asks a whole bunch of questions on it. Question number one is, if you follow the story, Abraham serves them meat and milk when they come to him to eat. And how could Abraham do that when, in fact, he kept the whole Torah? This is impossible. I'm sorry, I'm using my phone today. That's why there's some disruptions. So Abraham Avinu, in the meal that he serves them afterwards, it seems that he serves them meat and milk. How could he do that when Abraham Avinu kept the entire Torah? But another question you have to ask is, how could Abraham have the audacity to turn to God, who's visiting him, and say, God, I can't talk to you now. I've got to go visit the Arabs. So commentary says, because this is the most amazing thing. How could he have the audacity to leave God and run and bring in the Arabs? Because Abraham Avinu Abraham gets to a level in life where Abraham was able to see the good and the godliness in everything. He was able to see the godliness in everything. So when he was speaking to God, he saw God. When somebody came near in his orbit, he saw the godliness in the person. He didn't see a person based on his wealth and his charisma, on his their power. He saw the godliness in everybody. And therefore, I'm here, I'm talking to you, God, and there I'm going to find you, God, vested in a person. And of course, the down-to-earth lesson for us is that when we meet somebody, Jew or non-Jew, we have to look for the godliness. And how can we uplift every single person we meet? That's what we learn from Abraham Avinu. We'll come back to why Abraham Avinu seemed to serve them meat and milk. We'll come back to that when we know that Abraham Avinu kept the entire Torah. Okay. But nonetheless, within each and every one of us, a Jewish soul is good and bad. There's light and darkness. And the light is the goodness that we have. But if we're naturally good, it's just animalistic. We have to always direct it to God. Now we're going to speak about the non-Jewish souls. And before speaking about the non-Jewish souls, well, let me first read it to you. Now, he says like this. So our souls come from this room that is made up of dark and light. Therefore, we have natural bad characteristics, but we have good characteristics as well. Okay, that's what we have. Where does it come from? Vahi, page 47, second paragraph. Vahi misod eitzadas tovera. Our soul is exactly the same thing as the Garden of Eden, the fruit tree in the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve were told not to eat from. How long was the commandment from Adam and Eve not to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge? Anybody know? Gabby, how long? 3 hours, by the way. The whole mitzvah not to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge was 3 hours. They were supposed to eat. That's why some people say it was grape. They were supposed to make kiddush on Friday night. And what they really did was they got drunk on Friday afternoon, but that's for another time. So the tree of knowledge had good and bad in it. Friday afternoon, they weren't allowed to eat the fruit. Shabbos, they were allowed to eat the fruit. So it had this good and bad. If they would have waited till Shabbos, they would have elevated the entire world. There would be no death, no suffering, nothing that we've been through. Good. So we are like a tree. That's a good way of explaining it. We are like a tree of knowledge. We have good in us and bad in us. We're exactly the same thing as the fruit that Adam and Eve ate from, good and bad. If they would have only left it there for Shabbos, everything would have been good. Now he says like this. When you speak about the non-Jewish nations, where do the non-Jewish souls come from? From the three chambers that are underneath this room. Right? In other words, because a non-Jewish soul comes from the three dungeons below, the three dots where there's no light, therefore, a non-Jew cannot, according to, we'll see where he brings it from, a non-Jew cannot have a relationship that is not reciprocal. He can have good in him, but the good he'll always have will have to be, the way God made him, will have to be for an ulterior motive. Now, most of us, as we go through our journey in life, 99.9% of the time, and justifiably so, our relationships are reciprocal. We do good because others are doing good to us. But we are commanded to get to a level that's beyond that. A non-Jew isn't. And that's what it says in Kabbalah, which was written 2,000 years ago. That all the kindness of the nations is done for selfish motive, which is not a terrible thing, because that's the way we behave most of the time. And as we find in the Gemara, which was also written 2,000 years ago, that the kindness of the nations is not right. Any kindness that a non-Jewish person does is for self-glorification. Let me clarify. I want to be clear. So first of all, you can understand something now. you can understand that according to Jewish belief, there's a difference between a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul. It comes out that a Jewish soul comes from this room, a non-Jewish soul comes from 3 dungeons. You know, it's impossible to teach with all these. Guys, I'm sorry for all these interruptions. My computer's not working. So now, let me clarify. From this room, which is made up of good and bad, or darkness and light, the Jewish animal soul comes from. All kosher animals come from this room. Stones come from this room. Kosher fish, kosher poultry, etc. all come from this room. Nonsense talk all comes from this room. When you go to the 3 dungeons below here, all non-kosher animals come, and that's where the souls of non-Jewish people come. Now you can understand why you cannot marry a non-Jewish person. Now you can understand why you can't eat treif. So hold on a second. How can it be that a non-Jew converts to Judaism? Because we know you can never elevate something that comes from the 3 lower dungeons. And this is amazing to hear. There are 2 possibilities. There are two ways it can happen. Number one, if you look at the expression in the Torah about a non-Jew who converts, it always says a ger shenizkar. It doesn't say a non-Jew who converts. A non-Jew, I want to put it this way for this year, a non-Jew cannot convert to Judaism. So who can convert? A ger shenizkar. That in that non-Jewish body, there was a Jewish soul. A Jewish soul, for whatever reason, was sent down to the non-Jewish body. That non-Jewish person, or that Jewish soul, which is in a non-Jewish body, is somehow going to meet up with Jews. And what's going to happen is they're going to want to convert. Somebody's going to push them to convert. Then all sorts of obstacles are going to be thrown their way. If there's a Jewish soul there, it will fight its way through. If it's a non-Jewish soul, it's not for me. And that's why, by the way, there are so many obstacles put by a court of Jewish law to a non-Jew who's trying to convert. Because if there's really a Jewish soul there, if I was a born dentist, and my parents insisted I become a lawyer, I'll go do it, but eventually I'll come back to being a dentist. So number one, that's why we use the expression a ger shenizkar, not a non-Jew converts. They were always waiting to convert. That's number one. Number two, there's also a category of non-Jewish souls that come from the same level of where our animal soul comes from. In other words, just like our animal soul comes from a place where there's dark and light, there's a category of non-Jewish souls that come from this level as well, and they can also convert. And that's why in Jewish belief, by the way, any single person who converts, there are 2 very strict laws. Not only do you have to love them as you love another Jew, but there's this extra special mitzvah to doubly love them because of all the trauma that they've been through. But it was always a Jewish soul waiting to come back. It was always a Jewish soul. It was always a Jewish soul waiting to come back there, which helps us understand why the court of Jewish law puts all these things there. But nonetheless, and that's why you see, by the way, it's an interesting thing. Okay, here's an interesting law for you. If a non-Jewish soul you have to doubly love and doubly respect, why can't a convert marry a Kohen? And the same thing, by the way, why can't a divorcee marry a Kohen? It seems to be that it's a slight on them. Seems to be that there's an imperfection in a non-Jewish soul who converted and in somebody who's gone through divorce. Why can't they marry a Kohen? Now let's start studying spiritual souls. And that's not the reason. The reason is as follows. If you had to put infrared glasses on and you had to look at everybody's soul, you would see that the soul of a Kohen, even though you might not see it externally, the soul of a Kohen is different to the Levi and the Israel like I am. I'm Israel. A Kohen's soul is different. A Kohen's soul is rooted in a place, whatever that spiritual place is, but it's ready at any moment for Mashiach to come and serve in the Holy Temple. So if you went back when the Holy Temple was standing, what did a Kohen do? A Kohen wasn't in business. His job was to serve in the Holy Temple. He did the sacrifices. He did all the things in the Holy Temple. That is the Kohen's soul. The Kohen's soul is made for the Holy Temple. Us, the regular people, we made to go into the hustle and bustle of this world. Good. Now, because a soul of a Kohen is made for the temple, he'll never have the broad-mindedness at a soul level to understand the trauma that somebody has gone through, not at that level. In other words, because a convert and a divorcee has gone through a journey in life, they've gone through a journey in life that's been very hurtful to them. The Kohen will never have the empathy to truly appreciate that because his soul is just not made like that. I'll give you an analogy. You have a very wealthy person who's born wealthy. They're born wealthy. They don't know what it means not to have silver goblets on their table. They cannot, and then you have another person who was born very poor and he becomes successful. To tell you the truth, the person who's born very wealthy and lived in a palace with butlers and servants all over the place can never really identify with somebody who's poverty-stricken. They just don't have it in them. They don't know what it means not to have fancy things. They just don't know what it means not to be able to put food on their table. That's the Kohen. So when it says that they can't marry a convert or divorcee, it's because those people have been through a trauma in life, not for any of their own reason. They've been through a journey in life that as a result of that, they need a special comfort, a special care, a special upliftment, and a Kohen can't give it. Now, before we go, can I keep you 5 more minutes today? I'm sorry, it was a bit jumpy and starty. I was a bit distracted because of the phone. I want to just go as follows. So where we're up to now is that we've learned, all I want you to take from chapter 1 is what I want you to take is that we have two souls within us. We have two souls within us, and we briefly explained the animal soul. For the next few chapters, we're going to discuss the godly soul, the power of the godly soul that a Jew has within him. And after that, we're going to come back to the animal soul and all the different things in this world. I want to mention to you, why can't a Jew, we'll conclude with this, why can't a Jew eat meat and milk? I can understand why I can't eat a prawn, because what we've learned now, a prawn soul comes from the 3 lower levels. The energy is from the darkness of the I can't elevate it. So I can't eat a prawn. And that's why I can't eat a pig. And that's why I can't eat anything that the Torah says is not kosher. And that's why I can't speak gossip, because the energy that I'm deriving when I speak gossip comes from the 3 lower levels. Good. But why can't I eat meat and milk? Meat is kosher and milk is kosher. So if I can eat meat and milk separately, why can't I eat them together? So on a simple level, the way you would teach it to a child, because God has an idiosyncrasy. God doesn't like meat and milk together. And because we want to have a good relationship with God, he told us not to eat meat and not to eat milk. And there is no real down-to-earth lesson. Why do some people not like certain things? God doesn't like that. But now let's learn it on a more Kabbalistic level. If you put infrared glasses on, when we come to chapter 3 and we start really learning about our godly soul, you will see that our soul is made up of 10 different powers. 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. One of the fundamental energies of the soul is an energy called love and kindness. Another energy of the soul is called severity and strictness. And we all have a combination of both. Some people are more naturally kind and some people are more naturally strict, by the way. Bear that in mind. When I was at school, the buzzword was IQ. And then later in the 90s, a new word came out called EQ. And what does EQ mean? That even if you're really bright, if you don't have a good EQ, you're not going to be truly successful. Why? Because there's always going to be belligerency and nobody knows where you're coming from. One day you're in a good mood, one day you're in a bad mood. You're in a great mood in the morning, something does something wrong, you get into a bad mood, your emotions are all over the place. And the Torah says there's nothing wrong with having different emotions, but you can't mix them. You can't mix them. Good. Now you must remember, every single time we eat something, we're absorbing 3 things within us. We're absorbing the flesh. And that's why if I eat a lot of meat, I'm going to eventually put on weight. If I eat a lot of bread, I'm going to put on weight. But besides the flesh, there's the soul in the particular food. Sorry, there's the energy in the particular food. So for example, meat has protein and bread has carbohydrate. But every single thing has a soul. Every single thing has a soul. That's why I can't eat a prawn, because I'm absorbing the soul within me. Every single thing has a soul. Every single thing has a soul. When God runs this world, he runs this world with emotions. Just like I have emotions within me, God has emotions. There's an emotion called love from Hashem. There's an emotion called severity from Hashem. Would you agree that day is more love? Why is there more love? I can see, I can run around. At night, I'm a bit more scared. Would you agree that life is about kindness and love, and death is severity? We're scared of death, right? Red is the color of severity. White is the color of kindness. It manifests itself. These emotions, by the way, when you speak about the emotions of God and us, emotions manifest themselves in every area of life. So I would say that day is kindness, life is kindness, the color white is kindness, darkness is severity, red is severity, Death is severity. Good. Let's put our infrared glasses on. If I look at the soul of milk, milk is white and comes from a living animal. And when I take the milk of the living animal, the animal continues to live. That is the epitome of kindness. So the soul energy of kindness is love. If I look at a meat is red. It comes from a dead animal. To get the meat, I have to kill the animal. That is the epitome of severity. Now, while severity is a good energy and kindness is a good energy, when I mix the two together, I get an emotional imbalance. Therefore, I can't mix meat and milk together. Because by mixing meat and milk together, I get an imbalance of kindness and severity that wobbles me. And we are very strict in Jewish law, by the way, of not mixing kindness and severity. You can now understand why we can't eat meat and milk. Because when milk is kosher, meat is kosher, mix the two together, there's a spiritual imbalance that I'm absorbing within me that will give me spiritual imbalance. So we would really believe that staying away from meat and milk will help me in my emotional balance. And that's why in Jewish law, by the way, a Kabbalist will never sit like this, because your right hand is kindness, your left hand is severity. You don't connect the two. You see it a lot in Jewish law. When you tie your laces, you first put your right shoe on, and then you put your left shoe. There's an order to do things, all because of kindness and severity. A law that you might not be aware of. We don't wear wool and linen together. Crazy law. You're not just like the Torah says, you're not allowed to eat meat and milk. You're not allowed to mix wool and linen. Same thing, kindness and severity. So why I say that is all of a sudden we're starting to understand that beyond this, go back to the original story at the beginning of this year about two souls fighting in heaven. We don't understand the idea of soul energy. So where we up to in our book, we're up to the fact that each and every one of us has two souls, and whatever we do, whatever we eat and consume, we are absorbing soul energy within us. So please, God, let's use the next week to elevate things around us and to uplift. I'll conclude with my final thought. The opening words of this week's parasha is about bringing first fruits. A farmer, an agricultural law, a farmer had to bring first fruits to celebrate his accomplishments. But even before the fruit was ripened, as the blossom came, he had to put a little sticker around it to say, this is going to be my first fruit. When the temple was destroyed, we don't do first fruits anymore. So how do we do it today? When a person gets up in the morning, and the first thing you do is you pray to God, you put your first energies to God. You don't know how your day is going to be. You don't know what's going to happen 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. You don't know what's going to happen. When you get up in the morning, you say, God, my day's for you. That's the way you offer your first fruits to Hashem. So let's use our energies to better ourselves and uplift the world. And I'll see you all next week. And please, God, my computer will be working.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was wonderful. Thank you.